H reveals former WWE chief Vince McMahon's almost lost his life in car crash. Former WWE chief Vince McMahon has been involved in a car crash that left his Bentley sports car wrecked, according to The Sun. TripleH breaks silence on Vince McMahon's near-fatal car crash. WWE is shocked after Vince McMahon's luxury Bentley is destroyed in a terrifying accident, and TripleH isn't holding back. WWE legend and former executive Vince McMahon was reportedly involved in a serious car crash that nearly claimed his life. In this video, we break down TripleH's emotional reaction, what really happened that day, and what this means for the future of WWE. Is this the end of an era? It began like any ordinary afternoon, traffic weaving through the West Palm Beach Expressway, the Florida sun casting sharp reflections off polished chrome, and the unmistakable silhouette of a silver Bentley Continental GT cutting through the lanes. But within minutes, that polished symbol of legacy, wealth, and power was reduced to twisted steel, scorched rubber, and broken glass. Inside it was Vince McMahon, the man who built an empire, redefined sports entertainment, and transformed a regional wrestling promotion into a billion-dollar global juggernaut, was now unconscious, slumped against an airbag, blood on his brow, as paramedics worked frantically to save his life. At that moment, WWE's reality and the future of its throne shifted forever. News of the crash didn't come through official channels. There was no press release, no carefully worded statement from Stamford, Connecticut. It was a panicked voice note, a garbled voicemail from a bystander who happened to recognize the billionaire executive being loaded into an ambulance. Within hours, a grainy photo leaked. Vince's mangled Bentley sprawled across a median, tires blown out, its front completely crumpled. The caption was only 4 words long. Is this the end? Before WWE could respond, speculation was already on fire. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was Vince drunk? Was he alone? Had he suffered a medical emergency at the wheel? But amid the swirling chaos, one figure remained silent, stoic, hidden, unreadable. Paul Levesque. TripleH. The heir to the WWE throne. The son-in-law. The man now entrusted with carrying forward Vince's legacy. And as the hours turned to days, fans began to ask, where was he? They didn't have to wait long. At 10:06 a.m. the following morning, a single tweet emerged from WWE's official account. It bore no image, no logo, just text on a black background. WWE confirms that Vincent K. McMahon, former chairman and CEO, was involved in a serious car accident yesterday afternoon. He is currently recovering under medical supervision. Our thoughts are with the McMahon family at this time. The tweet ignited millions of reactions. And yet, nowhere in the statement was the voice fans longed to hear. TripleH silent. Behind the curtain, it was a different story. Sources close to WWE headquarters tell a very different tale of that night, one filled with panic, midnight phone calls, and a man wrestling not just with grief, but with the weight of the empire he never truly asked to inherit. According to internal insiders, TripleH received the call about Vince's accident not from medical personnel, not from the police, but from Stephanie McMahon, who had been contacted by a close family aide. It was short, cold, mechanical. Vince. Accident. Alive. ICU. The words landed like a punch to the gut. And for a man who had spent his entire adult life in the shadow of Vince McMahon, as his star pupil, his champion, his eventual successor, it felt like the world had tilted. In the hours that followed, the McMahon compound in Stamford turned into a fortress. Executives were ordered to keep quiet. Legal and communications teams scrambled to control the narrative. Rumors swirled that Vince had been involved in a high-speed pursuit. Others suggested a medical condition had triggered the crash. Still others claimed there were passengers in the vehicle whose identities had not yet been revealed. And amidst it all, TripleH was nowhere to be seen publicly. But according to those closest to the situation, he was right where he needed to be, at Vince's bedside. For nearly a day and a half, Paul Levesque sat in silence at West Palm Medical Center's private suite. The room was guarded by private security, closed off to even senior WWE staff. Doctors moved in hushed tones. At times, the only sound was the mechanical rhythm of the heart monitor beside Vince's bed. A man who once strutted across WWE stages, larger than life, barking commands to thousands of employees and millions of fans, now lay motionless, broken yet alive. Triple H didn't speak to press. He didn't release a video. He didn't even text friends back. But when he finally emerged from the hospital on the third evening, he looked different. Older. Weathered. Changed. A photographer snapped a single shot, Paul stepping into a black SUV, face partially obscured, hand over his mouth. That image went viral within minutes. And with it, a single caption echoed across the wrestling world: "He's saying goodbye." But was he? Just hours later, Triple H broke his silence in a statement broadcast during a surprise WWE press conference streamed online. There were no theatrics, no entrance music, no leather jacket or scripted swagger. Just Paul Levesque, seated behind a table, his eyes sunken, voice steady but cracking under the weight of emotion. What he said stunned fans, friends, and the entire WWE locker room. "I don't know how to say this, but the man who made me, who gave me everything I have in this world, he nearly died. And it made me realize just how fragile even the strongest men are." The room fell silent. I was angry. Angry that I wasn't there. Angry that I had let distance form between us. And mostly, terrified. Because for the first time, I saw Vince McMahon not as a legend, not as a titan, but as a man. And men bleed. It was the most human Paul Levesque had ever been. And for fans used to the persona of the Game, the King of Kings, the cerebral assassin, it felt like a funeral eulogy for a man still breathing. Backstage, WWE officials were shaken. Morale, already fragile after months of creative shifts, was now fractured. Was Vince going to return? Had this crash ended all possibilities of a comeback? And if so, who was really in charge now? It's no secret that Vince McMahon had recently attempted to reinsert himself into WWE's operations, despite previously stepping down amid scandal. And for weeks, tension had reportedly been building between the old guard and Triple H's vision of a newer, more progressive WWE. But now, with Vince unconscious, possibly incapacitated, the balance of power was on a knife's edge. And Paul? He wasn't celebrating. He was grieving. Those close to Triple H described him as haunted in the days after the crash. He was seen pacing alone at WWE headquarters, staring at framed photos in Vince's old office, sometimes tearing up during private meetings with longtime employees. One staffer said, he kept asking himself, "Did I say everything I needed to say?" What few knew was that hours before Vince's accident, he and Triple H had reportedly argued over future creative plans. Vince had allegedly demanded more control over main event scripts heading into SummerSlam. Paul pushed back. Hard. That confrontation ended with the elder McMahon slamming his fist on a desk and walking out. Less than 12 hours later, his Bentley hit the guardrail at over 80 miles per hour. Did the argument haunt Paul? Undoubtedly. Did he blame himself? Perhaps. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a car crash. This was about legacy. In a rare private message shared by a WWE executive to close friends, Paul reportedly wrote, "This business, it was never just wrestling for him. It was war. It was his battlefield, his stage, his therapy. And if this is the end, I don't know if I'm ready to carry that weight alone." Outside WWE, reactions were swift and emotional. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson posted a photo of Vince and Triple H from WrestleMania 17, captioned, "The General and the Lieutenant," sending strength to both. John Cena issued a heartfelt message, "Vince gave me a chance when no one else did," praying for his recovery. Stephanie McMahon, notably absent from the public eye for months, released a single statement, "We're thankful he's alive. Please respect our family's privacy." But the world didn't stop watching. As news crews gathered outside the hospital and fans lit candles outside WWE's Stamford headquarters, the weight of the moment began to crystallize. This wasn't just about a man in a hospital bed. This was about the possible end of an era, the slow fade of a patriarch who had steered WWE through scandals, reinventions, Monday Night Wars, and WrestleMania booms. And now, all eyes turned to Triple H, the man left standing. Would he take the mantle fully? Would he shut the door on Vince's return permanently? Or would he leave it cracked open, hoping that the man who taught him how to fight would fight his way back one last time? In a follow-up interview with a close confidant, Triple H was asked what he saw when he looked at Vince in that hospital bed. His answer? "I saw a man who never stopped fighting. Even when he should have. Even when he didn't need to. He fought because fighting was the only thing he ever knew." And in those quiet words, fans understood something profound. For all the headlines, for all the controversies, there was still a bond between these two titans. Not just of blood, but of war, of dreams, of sacrifice. The Bentley crash was more than metal on pavement. It was a symbol, a metaphor for the collision between legacy and transition, between old and new, between the unstoppable will of Vince McMahon and the growing burden now resting on Triple H's shoulders. As Vince lay unconscious, with tubes in his nose and wires across his chest, the empire he built continued to spin raw-aired. SmackDown was taped, and fans debated storylines as if nothing had changed. But inside WWE, everything had. And in the final minutes of that emotionally charged press conference, Triple H leaned forward and offered one final message. If this is goodbye, if that was his last ride, then let it be known, he didn't go out quietly. He went out in motion. Like he always did. Full throttle. And with that, he stood, walked away from the microphone, and left the room in silence. The press conference ended. But the story? Far from over. In the days that followed Triple H's haunting press conference, the wrestling world braced for answers it feared might never come. Questions lingered like smoke in the air. What had truly happened inside that Bentley? Was Vince McMahon awake? Coherent? Could he walk, speak, command? The man who had built WWE into a global empire was now cloaked in silence, and his absence only amplified the noise. Yet for those inside the organization, that silence was deafening in a different way. The heartbeat of WWE, for better or worse, had always been Vince. Every final call on creative, every last-minute rewrite, every explosive gamble that defied logic yet transformed the industry, it all ran through him. Without Vince's voice echoing down the production truck hallway, WWE's corridors felt foreign, lifeless. For the first time in over 4 decades, a week passed without Vince McMahon weighing in on a single segment. Triple H was left to pick up the pieces. And he did, with a level of resolve that shocked even his inner circle. The first order of business was stability. He called an emergency meeting at WWE headquarters with department heads, creative writers, talent relations, legal, digital, and live event operations. Those present described the room as tense, somber, and quiet. Triple H walked in, wearing a black blazer, no tie, and placed a single envelope on the desk in front of him. Without notes. Without a teleprompter. He spoke from the heart. Vince is alive. He's stable. But he's not going to be on that plane to Raw next week. He's not going to be storming into Gorilla on Friday. And we don't know if he ever will. So I'm going to ask you all one question. He paused. Looked each person in the eye. Can we do this without him? There was no round of applause. No chance. Just silence. Until longtime production manager Kevin Dunn, visibly emotional, whispered across the table. We don't have a choice. And with that, the meeting became something else entirely, not just a logistics rundown, but a rallying cry. Triple H delegated duties with surgical precision. He empowered teams to act decisively without waiting on higher approvals. He shifted decision-making for pay-per-view setups, restructured SmackDown's script rotation, and, most notably, took back full creative control, quietly shelving several legacy storylines Vince had insisted on reviving. Some insiders called it a soft coup. Others called it survival. Still, through every decision, there was one undeniable truth. Paul Levesque wasn't celebrating. He was mourning. And he was doing it while carrying a company on his back. Back at West Palm Medical Center, updates on Vince's condition trickled in slowly and never officially. One nurse, speaking anonymously, shared that Vince had suffered a severe concussion, a fractured femur, and 2 broken ribs. He had required emergency surgery to stabilize internal bleeding and was being monitored in a private ICU suite under a pseudonym. The hospital staff was under strict orders to remain silent, with legal threats hanging over anyone who spoke out. But leaks happen, and one in particular would send shockwaves across the industry. A photo, blurry but unmistakable, began circulating online. It showed an older man lying in a hospital bed, hooked to monitors, his right hand clasped by a younger man seated beside him. The image wasn't confirmed, but fans were convinced it was Vince. And the man holding his hand was TripleH. The caption that accompanied it went viral instantly. The boss and his chosen son. One last match. It was poetic, painful, and, to many, prophetic. What followed was an outpouring of tributes that stunned even WWE's PR team. Wrestlers, legends, and even rival promotions released heartfelt messages about Vince. Not all were praise, but all acknowledged his impact. From Chris Jericho's tribute calling Vince a force of nature to Cody Rhodes simply tweeting respect. Always. The wrestling world united in rare vulnerability. But one message in particular stood out. Shane McMahon. In a post that quickly trended worldwide, Shane broke his long silence. My father and I haven't always seen eye to eye. We've yelled, we've walked out on each other. But when I heard about the crash, I didn't think about boardrooms or ratings. I thought about him teaching me to throw a punch when I was 8 years old. I thought about watching him run gorilla at WrestleMania. I thought about being his son. We all want our dads to be invincible. But sometimes, they're not. That post was the first public indication that the McMahon family, fractured by years of business feuds and personal distance, might be uniting again. Under the unlikeliest of circumstances. Back in Stamford, TripleH was facing another kind of challenge, investor confidence. With Vince out of commission, concerns about leadership began to swirl. WWE stock dipped. Analysts demanded transparency. One shareholder reportedly asked during a private call, if Vince never returns, is Paul Levesque prepared to lead this company into 2030? The answer was complicated. Because for all of Paul's strategic brilliance, backstage respect, and vision for a modern WWE, one thing remained unproven. Could he do it without the safety net of Vince McMahon? And in the days following the crash, that question grew louder. One tabloid claimed Vince's crash was the wrestling world's version of a royal abdication. Another headline read, "The Emperor Falls. Will the Prince Rise?" Speculation swirled that Vince's injuries might result in long-term incapacity or worse. Despite the family's silence, documents were allegedly filed in Connecticut's probate court regarding medical powers of attorney and asset protection. WWE Legal issued a cold, one-line response, no comment at this time. Meanwhile, back on WWE television, changes began to emerge. Storylines became more grounded. Matches had longer time slots. Camera work subtly shifted away from the chaotic zooms and hard cuts that had become a McMahon hallmark. Even the language of commentary changed, less shouty, more narrative. Triple H's fingerprint was everywhere. But the specter of Vince remained. Employees whispered that a giant portrait of Vince still hung in the Stamford boardroom. That his chair in gorilla position was left untouched during Raw tapings. That every script still began with the same phrase, as previously approved by VCAM. The ghost of Vince McMahon wasn't just haunting the halls. He was anchoring them. And then, just as the wrestling world began to settle into a new normal, a message changed everything. It came in the form of a private email, sent by Vince's longtime assistant to select members of the WWE Inner Circle. Its subject line, from Vince. The body? 4 words. I'm still in the fight. No elaboration. No signature. Just that. Triple H received it just minutes before going live on SmackDown. And when he stood backstage, headset in hand, he looked up at the monitors and whispered to himself, as one crew member later recalled. "Of course you are, old man. Of course you are." That night, the show opened with no intro music, no pyrotechnics, no shouty promo. Just a video package, black and white, chronicling Vince McMahon's legacy. From grainy footage of Madison Square Garden in the 70s to clips of WrestleMania pyros lighting up stadiums around the world. From "You're fired" catchphrases to the tearful 2023 Hall of Fame induction. And at the end, a simple graphic. Vince McMahon, the fight continues. The arena erupted. Not because Vince was a hero. Not because everyone agreed with his decisions. But because wrestling, at its core, is about resilience. Comebacks. Kicking out at 2 3/4. Triple H stepped out afterward, looked into the crowd, and for the first time in weeks, smiled. He didn't have to say it. Everyone already knew. The story wasn't over. Not yet. And maybe not ever. 2 weeks after the accident, Vince McMahon's hospital suite bore little resemblance to the man who once dominated boardrooms with a glare. The monitors were still there, beeping steadily, rhythmically, and the scent of antiseptic clung to the air. But the room had changed. Fresh white lilies now rested on the windowsill, sent by Dwayne Johnson. A stack of old WWF magazines sat by the bedside. And taped to the wall, barely visible behind a bouquet, was a single note written in sharp black ink. 4 words. "You built the impossible." It was from Stephanie. She had arrived at the hospital the morning after Triple H's press conference, quiet, composed, and fiercely protective. Though she hadn't appeared on WWE programming in months, insiders said her presence inside West Palm Medical Center was that of a lioness, navigating legal briefings, managing family members, shielding her father from the press, and coordinating with the McMahon family's private security firm. For all the tabloid drama that had plagued